Talia Layton confidently walked the hallways of Berentathi Station that surround Palaxi III. She walked through the now empty slave cabins, where slaves were transferred to ships bound for various slave markets. In some industries, House Berentathi was one of the largest suppliers of slaves in the galaxy. They despise slavery and are known to be willing to take slaves of any species at the cost of a few humans having traveled to the Berentathi universe simply due to the distance between them. I was there. Although the station was farther away, 80 miles from the borders of Berentathi and Dilian, trade was lucrative enough for lower-ranking people to transport unknown cargo to various parts of the galaxy. Humans' well-known aversion to slavery meant that these few human pilots were in high demand, as they repeatedly suppressed it whenever possible. After all, who would suspect that a human-piloted ship was transporting slaves? Humanity was a prolific trader, present in nearly every star system in the galaxy. In other words, the other human vessels were unremarkable. This allows you to move through parts of the space that the slave ship would stick out of. In most cases, only the largest companies were able to pay the fees, and they did not hesitate to punish those who interfered with their business. Apart from the curiosity of seeing humans for the first time, most people did not approach humans first to avoid the attention of their employers, so even the station staff did not say anything when they turned into a closed hallway. It took several minutes for her to reach her desired hatch. She knocked on the door in a pattern. 3 strokes, 2 strokes, 3 strokes. After a while, the hatch slid open, and Talia stepped over the threshold into a large but sparsely furnished room. The older Mr. Berentathi got up from his chair and went to greet Talia. "I'm very pleased that we were able to meet again. Too much time has passed," he exclaimed with a smile on his face. Talia returned the greeting with a smile. After Talia's chat, "How's she doing, Barracks? So what do you have for me?" Barracks stood up and led her to another door in the back. "There are 32 slaves who arrived from the station above Erishur Prime Talia. Whistle slowly. It's a long journey. Is your health as good as one would expect from a slave from the coup ruins of Barracks mines after this long journey?" he answered. "Let's take a closer look at them." Talia explained that Barracks led her to her room and opened another door in the wall behind her. It was hidden by some boxes and a curtain that could easily be moved aside with the push of a button. Opening the door revealed the usual slave body odor and bad breath from bad eating habits. And in this case, inside was a small, dusty room dimly lit and filled with slaves of various races. Each wears a slave collar and chain, which can knock the slave unconscious if they attempt to remove it. Barracks motioned for the slaves to come out and line up. Talia was surprised to find a human male among them. When he noticed her, she saw a look of disgust on his face. Talia walked along the line, inspecting each slave from all sides. When she finished speaking, she looked at Barracks and said, "I'll take it all." She handed the trust slip to Barracks to scan and picked it up. After Barracks, the collar's controller, gave her the chip back, they left the room and walked down the hall back to the main hallway. Several station guards accompanied the ship as the slaves were escorted through the corridors. A forceful-looking Berentathi came running towards me. He was trying to appear bossy and was probably expecting a bribe. "What are you doing? There have been no recent approvals for slave transfers." Berentathi yells, and Talia gives him a withering look and pulls a metal marker from her overalls. But when she sees him, Berentathi backs away and apologizes, before she scurries off. When she turned around, a human slave watched her open the airlock of her ship and order the guards to strap her slave to a bench in her hold. However, as the human approached the door, she moved the human and Koresh into the cockpit so she could keep an eye on the human, and since the hold was full after the slaves were loaded and secured, I brought it in. She walked over to the cockpit bench and took a seat. People started saying something, but she ordered him to be quiet while she got off the station so I wouldn't crash into it. She joked with her usual flair. She left the station without difficulty. She turned her ship towards the FTL exit point. There was an epic collision between 2 cargo ships, one just coming out of FTL and the other about to jump into FTL, so they had separate areas for jumping off. The men screamed at Talia and remained silent until the ship jumped. Then she turned to her guest. She unbinds Koresh, smiles for too long, and folds her hands. The Korean rubbed her wrist and said, "Talia, it's nice to meet you. When I saw you grinning, I almost blew my mask." She turned to the human and said, "Harriet Tubman, aka Harriet Tubman. Greetings to Captain Talia Layton." She didn't think he would understand the reference. There, she explained that I was one of several pilots who were helping to smuggle slaves from Barony and other slave settlements. She continued, "And you, my friend, are on the subway with a shocked face." He asked for the subway, but we are in space. Talia laughed lightly. This is a reference to a group of people who smuggled slaves in search of freedom in the 19th century. She nodded towards the Quran. "F was the route guide," she said, tilting her head as she reached out her hand to untie him. He stuttered. "Does that mean we're free?" Talia replies, "As long as we don't get caught." Phi laughs, "And whoever stops us will soon regret it. So when you investigated us, it was just a show for slavers?" He asked, and she answered, "Barracks is not a slave trader. It's one of the stops along the way. The inspection was to make sure it was okay to install on my boat, and you paid for it." I saw the man continue to ask questions. "Oh, it wasn't to buy you off, but to cover bribes and other operating costs." She answered, "It is funded by donations and other income. I don't know why this wasn't communicated to us." He asked if it might be better to wait until the last leg of the journey before telling us that many species are not good at hiding their escapes. We learned the hard way that it's easier to wait. She continued, "So we hire people like Foy here, volunteers, to quietly work with the targeted slave population, organize things, and lead the slaves to freedom. May I ask what it was?" They showed the officer, who was so scared of him that the human Talia asked, taking out a marker and staring curiously at the alien writing and the alien skull carved into it. Talia explained that it was a landmark for the Dartian Syndicate, a very powerful criminal organization involved in almost everything except the actual slave trade. We help them by smuggling things into various star systems. In return, they allow us to use their seals to scare lower-level officials. Would you like to share it with us? Good news. Remove the chain for now. Talia smiled as she listened to the cheers from the back of the ship, in case we were to board. That sound always made her feel like it was worth the risk.